In these stories, we find strength, we find courage, we find heritage, we find struggles, successes, we find icons, and in many ways kind of role models, I guess, even though it's a different time, it's a different world, I guess, but still there's an individual struggle that is the archetype of struggle, and we identify with that. So yeah, and it's a great way to get people to learn about characters and eras and certain, like a historic era within Islam, by you acquaint yourself with certain people and it comes to life. You see, for me, I think the stories have always been incredibly powerful, and it's something that for me made it come to life. When I would try to learn about, let's say I want to learn about a particular scholar in Islam, what I would do, especially in the past when I used to study systematic, when I was in my studies, I would always, like, let's say I've got a book. This book is by I don't know, this book is by Bakr ibn al-Arabi. Now, I may have heard of, but Bakr ibn al-Arabi is a huge example. I mean, he's a huge figure and with so much about him, but sure, you could take him as an example. Now, what I would do is I would first of all, okay, I've got the book. This is what the book is about. But what about him? Now, most Arabic books, the classical Islamic literature, it comes nowadays with like a whole gateway section. So this kind of, it's like an orientation. So before you get to the book, there's an entire kind of a preamble. This whole, it's before the introduction to the book. So it will say, first of all, the editor will say why they, brought this book back and why they thought it was a great choice. And then they will go into who the author was, his story. They will often go into his era, in what era, what political kind of things were going on during this person's time, who were his teachers, his students, something about him, what other books did he author. They will kind of go into all of this, and sometimes, depending on some books, they may even give you a bit about the discussion of this book, who else has authored on this book. So you get this huge orientation before you've even begun the book. And even if you didn't, I'm just saying, it's brought to you, it's at your doorstep. Sometimes that's not the case, and I would always try to find that about these people, and I'll try to let them come alive for me. So I'd learn about them. Okay, what did he do when he grew up here? And I would think in my mind, what era is that? And who else is alive in that time that's also huge? So I might think, so Bakr ibn Arabi's, he's there. Okay, this is the kind of time. Okay, Imam Ghazali exists. Okay, who else? And I might think, well, okay, Qadi Iyad exists. Ibn Rushd, the grandfather. You've got. So I'm thinking of people, and I'm kind of connecting them. And so what it does is, in your mind, you kind of make these maps. So, and also, where are they in the world? So I would kind of situate them in this mental map. So they are in Spain. Okay. Bakr ibn Arabi is an exceptional example, because he is one of those few people that actually wrote journals. I mean, he went out of his way to kind of, provide like almost medieval, what can we say, like insta posts. So he would write about things that are going on. He would say things like, on such and such date, I was passing through Baghdad and I saw this. And now you've got almost 900 years later, a snapshot and a window into that time. And he gives fascinating stories, and he'll say all sorts. Like he'll say things like, it was Molid, for example, and I was in Damascus, and this was going on, and he doesn't sometimes pass judgment, so it's not clear from just his descriptive side where he stands on that issue, and that is also speaks volumes, because he's not getting emotional, because sometimes he doesn't agree with the issues, but when he describes them, he's describing them so pleasantly that you would think, okay, so what's his take on it? But he's just so detached and just descriptive, and he says amazing things. I'll tell you, since we've started on Bakr ibn al-Arabi, he has one in one of his journals, and I think some people have tried to collate some of them, but they haven't collected them all. So scattered throughout his major works, he will just randomly throw in a journal edition. So he'll just kind of just say, oh, and on this date of this month I did this, and it may have some connection to, for example, the hadith he's giving a commentary on. And on one of them he speaks about Damascus. So whilst he's in Damascus, so the thing about Bakr ibn Arabi, as a young man, he kind of travels all around a huge part of the Muslim world. So he kind of goes through. His father is a political kind of envoy, so he kind of tags along and he travels through parts of Spain, and he always hears this glory from the east. So it's amazing, because you see, it's how reputation, I guess, kind of carries off. So he'd always held Abul Walid al-Baji in awe, who was a generation before him, or a generation and a half almost before him. But he is he's somebody that leaves Muslim Spain, goes off for over a decade to the east, does all these studies. He's a huge Maliki. He comes back to Spain. Abul Walid al-Baji, he's known as al-Baji, and there, when he comes back, he hears of this phenomenon of Ibn Hazm, who has kind of wreaked havoc on the Malikis, and then he goes toe to toe with and butts head with Ibn Hazm, and they have all these debates. Unfortunately, their debates are not actually documented. Such a shame, but what is documented is that they had so many debates, and Ibn Hazm says that I finally he kind of concedes to having met his match. He says that nobody did stand in front of me, because Ibn Hazm in debating was just a phenomenon that could not be rivaled. And so he says that there was nobody that could, be an impediment to the force I brought. He says, and the Malikiya did not produce anybody. Ibn Hazm. He goes, they didn't produce anybody that could do that until Abul Walid al-Baji re-entered Al-Andalus. And he comes back, and he's a force to be reckoned with, incredibly sharp. And he puts Ibn Hazm, it's difficult to say. In the books, they don't give the debates, which is such a shame, but they say that they both kind of won some, lost some, but it was not, it was like it's the kind of, it was a force, an unstoppable force that met an immovable object, if you like, and this was it, the showdown. So this personality always strikes awe in all the Andalusis that come after him, and they want to be like him. So they want to go off and study, and Ibn Arabi gets that opportunity, but he writes these things, then journals, as he goes off. And so in Damascus, as I was saying, he mentions that he was hosted in at the home of some, I take it like some wealthy person that kind of saw him and invited him to some meal. And he describes that in this person's house, in their home, they had so this large seating area, and they had like a small stream, like probably I'm assuming, maybe like just half a meter in kind of width. And this stream of water, like a moat, it kind of encircled this seating area, and it had a veil, a curtain on one side, and the stream obviously is coming through, and then it had a curtain on the other side and the stream. And he said what they would do is people in on the other part of the of the house, they would put dishes and food and drink and tray on trays and allow it to just come through this stream as they sat there, and they would just take things as at their leisure, and just kind of once they finished with them, they would just put them back on the stream, and the stream would just. That's fantastic when you think about it. This is 900 years ago, and so things like this give you a portal into their world, and it's amazing. And we have to one of the days go through Abu Bakr ibn Arabi's stories, because he goes through a hell of a lot with his journey, and he documents. So there's this huge story of him getting shipwrecked, and they get shipwrecked near Egypt, I believe, and I'm not sure whether it's Alexandria or wherever, but they're placed with these refugees, and he speaks of how he kind of obviously just a nobody amongst these refugees, how he sees one of these kind of chieftains, if you like, of this whole area, like a somebody that playing a game of chess, and we've got to cover that story sometime. And he goes and he stands. A few people standing by these two who are like these kind of almost like the oligarchs of that region. So these people are sitting there playing chess, and some people are watching, and there's this refugee site not so far off, and he's wandered along, and he ends up there, and he starts watching, and he sees that. So what happens is it's a tense game, and this major figure, this kind of chief person, he he's about to make a move, and he makes a different, like he's about to move something, and then he moves. I've forgotten. We'll have to bring the. I don't know if he recalls the exact piece, but he makes a move in chess, and Abu Bakr ibn Arabi speaks out like he's a kid I think he may be like 16 or something. So he says, he says he's even more intelligent. Like he makes a comment that he's even more strategic than than anyone can believe. Like he makes a comment that, wow, that what a strategy. And you see, even the guy who moves the piece, he gets like, he's thinking, what has this guy seen that I haven't seen? So it's amazing that you see he catches the attention of this person, so he's really intrigued by him, and then he kind of earns his favor, and that guy after the game calls him and says, what did you see? Like, what did I do? What was it that was so impressive? And then he explains, and see, it just goes back to fate, I guess, how it ties into today's topic in some way, in many ways, that you see a skill or some knowledge or something we harbor and harness never goes to waste. And here Abu Bakr ibn Arabi's mastery over chess in in a ruined state as a kind of refugee turns the tables for him, and where he then finds this element of success whilst from a a position of from a destitute position. So it's incredible that, wow, and it's all really about perspective, how you see things.